Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is delightful to be here amongst so many familiar faces and just a really warm community. Just in sort of similar, in gatherings with individuals, we have really sort of commented on how important this moment is for reminding us all of the why in terms of why we're doing this work in such a very sort of critical moment in time. And being around one another in this convening and in this community really does sort of help us to ground ourselves in terms of what we're doing and why we're doing such critical and important work. Before I go forward, I want to also, like many others, thank Kamal, Cecilia, and all of the organizers that are behind the scenes who may not have the privilege of the podium, who are making this program possible. So thank you all very, very much. As noted yesterday in the Kamal's opening remarks, and throughout all of these sessions, we are recognizing that museums have increasingly acknowledged the historical underrepresentation of women artists in collections, exhibitions, and scholarship. Even there's a dearth of information in the archives. Numerous reports and institutional initiatives have documented the scale of this imbalance, and many museums have begun to address it through exhibitions, research, and acquisitions. But I'm also sort of drawn to this statement by the cultural scholar and writer Bell Hooks, who wrote in Art on My Mind, representation is a crucial location of struggle for any exploited and oppressed people asserting subjectivity and decolonization of the mind. And I think that really sort of anchors what we want to talk about with these directors. And I must say, this is a very esteemed group, but there are about over a dozen museum directors in this space right now that we're just really thrilled that you all are here. And so this is a sort of space where we really want to sort of unpack some specific ways and toolkits in terms of how you all are addressing the work that you do. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you first a general question in terms of how are you all in this moment, this cultural landscape, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And I'm going to start with this beloved woman to my left, Kaywin, at the National Gallery of Art, where this question may have a multitude of answers.
Thank you, Rhea. Actually, first of all, I did want to mention that most of today is focused on the visual arts, but I wanted to comment on the similar struggles that we've seen for women in architecture. And this great library, such an important building for Washington and designed by Mies van der Rohe. But the space we're in now is an addition done in 2000 by the Dutch firm Meccano, headed by a woman architect, Francine Uban, who founded the firm. So shout out for, how I'm feeling. I am very closely approaching my 60th birthday. And I have decided that my birthday present to myself for this momentous period is that I am just enveloping myself in gratitude. And I am focusing on the amazing people who have come before me. I think about when it was time for me to go to college, and my father started taking me to coffee and saying, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I just didn't know. And in hindsight, I realized it's because there really weren't any working women working outside of the home in my orbit. And Mary Tyler Moore was the only working woman on television. And so I couldn't picture myself. And fast forward to me about maybe 40, 45, sitting down with a mentor of mine in Minneapolis, and I was complaining about the challenges for women in the world, and she gave me a little talk about patience and how much has changed in the world and the change she had seen in her lifetime. And so I'm at that point now, too, of also being really, really grateful for the artists who are here, for all of the leaders, for my colleagues. And I want to do a special gratitude shout out to the curators in the room. There are a number of National Gallery curators and staff members here. If you could all wave for me, they're amazing. And all the other curators in the room. This is a particularly challenging time, I think, to sort of navigate waters, and I'm honored and grateful to work with extraordinary people doing that. So, and I'm just going to close, I know you want me to move on, by saying that my gratitude doesn't mean that I'm resting.
Yes, thank you for that. Christophe.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Kamal and Cecilia for having us and convening all of us. I can tell you, each and everyone should sit in one of those chairs just for a few seconds. It's just amazing to see you all. And that's really empowering, to say that we are here connected with each other. And I want to go back to what Cecilia started with, which I thought was just a perfect way to frame that idea of shared belief. And I think we are here sharing values, sharing ideas, and I wanted to remind people that museums are just people. You know, before being a collection, before being a building, before being a program or exhibition, it's a group of people working together, not always agreeing with each other, but sharing core values and vision. And I was so moved when arriving yesterday to see, for instance, so many of my colleagues being here. Not that we prepared it, but so many. I see Michelle Kuo here, Raj Roy, our head of film, is here. Our president, Sarah Harrison, is here. Michelle Elgart, head of archive and library, are here. Ellen Hatch, Megan Johnson from External Affairs. And that's so empowering, to say that a museum is really a group of people thinking together about how we can commit to ideas that we have defined at the Museum of Modern Art as priorities, knowing that what matters to me is not the speed, but the pace. And that pace is only it's possible to sustain it if we keep reinforcing each other. You know, I think what matters in museum is the long haul. You know, you can make change overnight. Those most probably won't have an impact on the long haul for the collection and for the visitorship. I think it's about bridging generation. It's about finding ways to develop a vision that is profoundly a collective vision. So that's my feeling today.
Thank you. You all are going to get enough of hearing from me.
I know, I was going to say, and so our rock star.
No, not at all. I don't know, how am I feeling? I feel concern and conviction, heaviness and determination, despair, and a sense of urgency. I mean, it is a moment where, you know, one is talking to their kids about, like, wow, you have less rights than I had, than I have, if we're not careful. And so as that applies to our work, you know, I'm feeling like, are we prepared for this moment? As leaders, I feel like those are the kinds of questions that I think we need to be asking ourselves. So I'm feeling a tremendous sense of quiet, or maybe not so quiet, desperation, if I'm being very honest. And we can come and sit in a room like this, and it can be, I mean, it is amazing to see y'all.
Yeah.
and see faces that I adore and respect and people that I know do amazing work. But are we ready as a field to be in this moment right now? Is, I think, the kind of, not as individuals, but as a field as a whole, are we ready in this moment? And so I'm feeling a sense of urgency. Yeah.
So thank you for that. And ditto. And I want to acknowledge that our country is at war with itself and with the world. And that for some of us in the room, that war is very real. Family members and friends and colleagues. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being here and for being present and bringing your full selves to this convening. I feel, in addition to all those feels, grateful that we have work to do, that we get to do it. We can vote, we can give to political campaigns, but we can do something more. We can shape stories, we can resist, we can lean into hard truths, important truths, and we can live up to our values of inclusion and diversity and equity. And I'm reminded of Sherilyn Ifill, who said, Anne, there is a time for harvesting. You know this very well, Sarah. There's a time for harvesting, and there's a time for planting. And we've been harvesting from the same fields for a very, very long time. People who had the vision to create the 14th Amendment, the civil rights leaders, leaders of the women's movement, queer movement, labor movement. It goes on and on. And this is the time to plant seeds for the future of what we want our democracy and our world to look like. And then I'm further reminded from Sarah's conference at the Ford Foundation, the Art and Justice, Vision and Justice Conference, when Brian Stevens said, it's time to draw a new America, for we are the picture makers. I want to leave that with you guys.
I am struck by this notion of urgency because Martin Luther King's sort of words have been really sort of a refrain for me lately, and this sort of urgency of now that, you know, there was always this sort of wait, and he was like, there's an urgency of now, and that is what it feels like I'm hearing, even through the gratitude, through the sort of trepidation, that there needs to be a sort of action moving forward. So with that in mind, I'm asking sort of, at what point does institutional progress move from symbolic to structural? What would that threshold for each of your institutions actually look like? What are some specific steps that are necessary to affect change? Anyone can answer. So this is not, this is a general question, but please, I don't want everyone to feel obligated. We don't have enough time for all of that. So, I would love for someone to sort of take the mantle.
I'll jump in.
Great,
Because
thanks.
I'm so shy. I am very blessed that I inherited an institution with a male director, Arnold Lehman, who created a feminist center at the Brooklyn Museum. And I'm thrilled that our curator of feminist art, Catherine Morris, is here. Hi, Catherine. You have no idea how inspiring it is to work with Catherine on a daily basis. We already had a commitment to women and to feminism, and you can go back through the history and cherry pick through all of our histories. George O'Keeffe had her first museum show at the Brooklyn Museum, blah, 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 blah. We all have those stories. But when I got to the museum, we were looking at the 10th anniversary of the Feminist Center, and it was an opportunity to adjust and say we're a feminist institution. And so what does that mean? It means our leadership on our board is very well represented by strong, opinionated, brilliant, values-driven women. It means that at all levels of our staff, that's the case. Our collections, our exhibitions, think about it. In just the past 10 years, we've done Black radical women. We wanted a revolution, radical Latin American women artists. We've done lots of survey shows. Honored to have partnered with you on Elizabeth Catlett. Thank you. That was a very courageous thing for you to be doing, especially in this moment. Lorraine O'Grady, and the list goes on and on and on. And so it's the collections, it's the leadership, it's the exhibitions, it's how you're crafting stories thoughtfully to really uphold values. And so it's really, the structure is in the DNA of all that we do in the institution.
That's specific to, and thank you, and brava and kudos to you and your organization and that commitment. But if we look at this as sort of a grand narrative in terms of the institutions, how then are there other sort of sort of examples or suggestions or recommendations for cultural cohesion that we could really see changing the tide for all of the institutions, not just sort of a bespoke museum here and there, a regional or a women's college, et cetera, but where within the ecosystem are we making suggestions to our colleagues and peers to really move that needle?
Well, I'll let them answer it, but I do think that we are a model for the field. I'm not being defensive. I'm just saying you don't have to write a new book on this one, right? An example, multiple examples, but an example.
So how then could we look at that and sort of employ some of those examples perhaps at MoMA?
Absolutely, and I think those ideas are always best shared. And I think for me, I mean, my first thought was to think about the artists who really led the way. A museum, an institution like MoMA always work in relation to emerging practices, artists who really pave the way and push us in places we might be sometimes not totally comfortable. This morning we mentioned Elizabeth Murray, for instance, who organized, for instance, an artist choice exhibition at MoMA only with women in 1995. Recently, we were able, and I see Connie Butler here, just director of MoMA PS1, we were lucky enough to organize a retrospective of artists like Yoko Ono or Adrian Piper, which showed us a way that institutions, artists can find a way through the public, this kind of direct access, without waiting for the institution to validate their own practices. So yes, institution comes sometimes later, but what we did in 2019 with a group of colleagues was to really change the way we would envision our collection gallery, just rethink the experience of the museum, adding rotation, being cross-disciplinary, and most importantly, committing to be more inclusive, to be inclusive of gender, geographies, and ethnicities. And by saying that together, having those kind of, being really public about our desire to change the way people experience the main narrative of art, even more so for an institution that created those narratives in the first part of the 20th century, we have those markers today. And we have to be very self-critical about saying, are we really following those priorities? I ask, for instance, just coming here, how many objects are by women artists on our second floor? Just a simple thing, a fact. Second floor is dedicated to the last 40 years. It's over 60%, which surprised me. But I mean, we should be proud of that. And we should say people need to understand that if those galleries are so vibrant, so engaging throughout the museum, it's because we are more inclusive. We brought, art that had not been taken into account as it should have. And for me, really, there's just no way back. I mean, the public has chosen. You wouldn't go back to, I can imagine in Brooklyn or at the National Gallery, to gallery installation the institution would do 20, 30, or 40 years ago. And I think that's something very empowering, that we are showing the way that being inclusive really change, make our work a much, much more engaging place to be.
I
Go ahead.
would also credit MoMA when you reopened after your last edition. I remember my first experience of going through the galleries, and seeing so many artists I'd never heard of. And I still remember one label mentioned that an object had been in the collection almost since you opened and had never been on view. And it was so wonderful that, not knowing any of that, I crossed the room to go look at it. And I feel that installation from MoMA, at least for me in a regional institution, gave us all permission to start showing artists that hadn't been seen before, regardless of their gender or background or nationality. And that permission or example now has meant that instead of, I think museums were too much like a Noah's Ark of you had to have 2 Matisses and 2 Rembrandts and 2. Now we're all finding really new interesting work, and I don't just mean in contemporary art, going back to old masters, and that's really, I think, led to an extraordinary change from my perspective.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You sure?
Yeah, sure.
You go for it.
No, go for it.
Okay. So just a qualifier, I am not a sitting museum director right now, which puts me in a very unique position. Just kidding. So to answer your question of like how do we actually do what we're saying we're doing is to do it. I mean, it's that simple. So like if you say you're going to hire these types of people, hire those types of people, and do the work to hire those types of people. When I went to work at my last post, we were in a good position, and we hired, I remember we hired 6 people, all women across different areas of the institution, and you would have thought I blew up the universe. People were like, where did you find these women? Like literally reporters asked me, where did you find these women? And I think that's interesting. Like kind of if you just do what you say you're going to do, then do just that actually makes a huge difference. Or just don't say that you're going to do those things. Like how about that? Don't take the money from the funder who is saying I'm going to support this initiative. Let somebody else have it. And I think that actually ties to the structural shifts that happen. Funders actually drive a lot of these conversations. So if the money is saying support community engagement, support diversifying your staff, and those kinds of resources exist, that actually shifts what institutions do, if we're really being honest here, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's this partnership that has to exist because an institution on its own doesn't have those resources. And so they need people like Kamal, they need people like foundations and individuals to actually be partners to pressure test the system, push it a little bit more. The pendulum is swinging in this other direction, and we need people with those resources to kind of push the pendulum back, because the individuals at the organizations can't do it on their own. The second thing I would say is that I think it's really interesting when we think about our decisions around collecting practices and those kinds of efforts. We can say this is however many percentages of women artists, but if you break that down and say, well, how many of them are Black? How many of them are differently abled? How many people are, from Palestine? How many people are from wherever? I mean, we start to look at stuff in a more critical way as opposed to just saying women, because there are greater challenges outside of just being a woman in the space. Not saying just being a woman, because that's a big deal, but my intersectionality is complex, as every woman's is, every person's is. And I think that this work is really important because it deserves that nuanced look at the various pieces of the information. I'll stop there. You can go. Okay.
No. what I was going to say, just add to your comment, saying that, of course, we need to have a finer grain and just to understand what we acquire and making sure that we look at that through many prisms and perspectives, but also that we commit to show the works we acquire.
Absolutely.
Because what good does it do to acquire works and put them in storage for 20 or 30 years? And I was going to respond to Kaywin saying that what was for us really absolutely transformative is that in 2019, if the reopening felt different, that 40% of the work either had not been shown for 40 or 50 years or just acquired. So that shows the work we have to do. Those work are there, and it's about acknowledging them and giving them a presence and a role and a function that they participate in the vibrancy of those programs.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you're saying, and this sounds very boring, but it's very important, it's called measurement.
Yeah.
And I remember Mike Bloomberg saying, you can't manage what you don't measure.
That's right.
Yep.
And that's really important. If we're not actually measuring, we're not doing the work. So when you talk about structural change, to me, that's foundational.
And it's a perfect segue. It's like we talked before or something. In terms of what indicators should we actually be measuring? Is it enough, as you've just said, to sort of look at percentage of acquisitions or budget allocation for certain things, even staff or, as well as acquisitions? What about sort of how are we measuring exhibition programming? I think one of the earlier panels really talked about how at the Walker, there was obviously great intentionality that went into activating that exhibition in terms of the design, in terms of the programming, and then scholarly output. So as directors, you have certain sort of headwinds and other sort of practical operational mandates that you have to keep in mind, budget primarily, but then juxtaposing that with these other indicators about sort of acquisitions, curatorial hires, the ways in which you're creating a culture of cohesion. How are you measuring that and then sort of translating that to the board and other members of sort of your ecosystem to make sure that they really remain in lockstep with your vision? I'll pick on.
Okay, we measure everything. We try to measure just about everything. It's the acquisitions,
But
the
then what
exhibitions, the
becomes
public
measurements
programs.
of success, I guess?
Well, it's just about keeping us honest. It's not that we have specific KPIs. Things are going to change from year to year. But, for example, if you're saying, okay, we're measuring board composition, then you're keeping yourself accountable. If you're saying we're doing a renovation project and we're looking at who we're hiring as contractors, you're making sure you're keeping your eye on the prize, right? And you're able to have constructive conversations around where you succeed and where you're not succeeding. And you keep passing the baton further down the road.
One of I think we're all measuring. I think most museums are right now. But one of the challenges we haven't talked about yet is that I think the museum average is that at least 80% of our collections come through gift, not from purchase, which means we're dependent on what collectors collect. And unfortunately, there aren't enough Kamal Shahs out there collecting work by women artists and artists who have been traditionally underrepresented in our collections. And our collection plan at the National Gallery really focuses on where are the gaps in our collection. And our collection has been formed heavily, primarily by gifts from patriotic Americans, and our collection reflects the tastes of American collectors from 1950 to today. And so that's a real challenge, is how we work to bring our boards and our patrons and our collectors along so that our galleries do look like the nation and the world.
I would second that and maybe add as another measure of success, and we talked about that last night, about how we perceived. Because we can feel really great about what we are doing, but if that message doesn't go through, we are failing. And just to give an anecdote, in 2019, with our new hang, we all felt really great. We had good numbers. It was just a reimagined galleries according to our priorities. And my kids' class came to visit the museum. And I said, oh, why not give to each of them a postcard, as a souvenir of the museum? So I stopped by our shop, wanting to buy 20 postcards. There was just one postcard by a woman artist, Frida Kahlo. And if we don't pay attention to that, we fail, because the message really doesn't go through. So it's not about just the board, the staff, the programs, the collection. It's everything throughout the institution.
Yes.
And I think it's on every one of us to be attentive to that. Is our message really communicated? Do really people understand what we are trying to say? And that's a real challenge, but also an opportunity for us to change.
And I think both of the points that you all raised is sort of sparking for me this question around sort of educating board members, right? So why are they actually on the board? What is their, if they are sort of skewing perhaps toward a more sort of conservative vantage point, but you have curators and even educators who are pushing forward another agenda, not agenda, but another sort of vision, curatorial vision for 50 years down the line, if you will, for the institution. How are you sort of reconciling and creating kind of examples for bridging that gap between perhaps what this board member is willing and interested in gifting, for example, versus the curatorial collecting plan or curators' scholarly interest that may not align with necessarily what you have in your collection, and how that could sort of help us to bridge some of those gaps. Does anyone have any examples of how they've worked with bringing together their curators and their board members to be more in sync?
Well, the best board members are the ones who are curious, who are there to learn, who are eager to spend time with curators in the galleries, and who will go to art fairs with curators and are on a learning journey. Those are the very best trustees, are the ones on a learning journey.
I think it's so interesting. I'm so intrigued by this line of questioning because I think it's fascinating to think, just kind of the obscure board member, right? Or this obscured gallery. Like, for example, when I think about, right now, galleries are like talking to collectors before they even talk to institutions, not all of them, about, I'm going to buy this work of art, but they tell the artist, they tell the collector, but you can only have this artist's work if you buy another one, that you're going to put in an institution with no home for that institution yet.
Right.
Not all gallerists do that. Thank God for some of them that don't do that. There's some of them in this audience. But they are already thinking about the institution, have had conversations with those institutions, and so they can be placed. But one of the challenges I have is when I'm thinking about board members and I'm thinking about artists, or I'm thinking about women artists or women board members and women museum directors, it's kind of like, I think we have to think about the kind of women artists, the kind of woman director, the kind of, like, what are we actually looking for in some of the characteristics, right? And I think, like, getting beneath the surface of that, and I think the best relationships between a curator and a board member are the ones that are around the values of the institution, the vision for the institution, not just the individuals that are at play. And we have a whole culture that's built around individuals.
Yes.
And so, like, how do we, like, make that big shift where it really truly is about what's best for the institution, and what alignments have to happen, and when do you actually have to say no? Like, no to that object, but the implications of saying no are serious.
Exactly.
If we're going to have the real conversation here,
exactly.
the implications of saying no to a collector, to a funder, to a board member are pretty significant. And so I think having a conversation about the inception of those relationships is really probably at play here, right? I think you've been really intentional about.
Yeah, well,
about
you know,
that.
Glenn Lowry gave me the best piece of advice anybody ever gave me. He said, Anne, build your board. You can only be as great as your board. And truer words have never been spoken. And I have been very intentional and careful about how I built my board. And many of my trustees, present and former, are here right now, and which I think speaks volumes about them. I would never have survived the past several years had I not had a board that had my back, that we were able to be in hard conversations with one another, that we could at least lean in and have the conversation, and maybe not always agree, but at least still root ourselves in what is best for the institution and what our values are. And so there is not a science for this. It's an art, and it's about building trust.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from both of you all, at least in this last statement, is about sort of what risk are museums willing to take as it relates to these questions around equity? And how is that sort of, particularly at this fraught moment that we're in right now, how are you navigating sort of, you've talked about having that board and really sort of being very intentional about that. But again, I'm sensitive to the idea that, these risks, that saying no could have some tremendous implications, and especially when it comes to questions around equity. So, I would love to hear if you have any solid examples of how you've been able to sort of make those calculated risks, if you will, towards this notion of equity.
I'll be honest and say, we have 1 minute. I'll be honest and say that sometimes the job of the leader is to make the least bad decision out of only bad options. And we don't have 100% freedom, so I don't want to give people the idea that everything is a bed of roses.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you have to make the calculated decision about what best honors the values of the institution and the longevity and health of that institution. And you don't get to do everything you hope to do, or you would want to say.
Yeah, in some cases, you're playing a long game with this person. It's like, okay, right now we're going to have this. And you were talking about education. I think people don't come baked ready. You know what I mean? And so, like, you have to be like, okay, like, oh, you in the incubator, but you over here, you're somewhere else. I don't actually need to be having this conversation. You two need to be having this conversation. I think there's so many different ways to get there. But the idea that you can't do this stuff is actually not true.
That's right.
The fact that you must do this stuff is actually true if you're going to survive in today's society and be relevant at all. And so I think that, you cannot have an institution where leadership is not thinking about these very nuanced, important conversations and actions, not just conversations, actions that are related to tangible outcomes that people see you doing something. And so I think that the board is a good partner.
And I think the board would recognize that what makes a museum extraordinary is its independence, its capacity to be innovative, to take risks, to be experimental. And also recognize that there are more things that bring together most probably the staff and the board that think that takes them apart. So I think we all realize that we serve something that's greater than us, at least in the institution we represent. It's really about build that trust, but also make sure that curators are empowered. Curators can take risks. I think one of the challenges today is self-censorship, to be afraid to do something because of a potential consequence of that action. So I think here the leadership of museum need to be there to create a safe space where people have the right to take risks and also the right to fail.
And I think that within this, and I know we have no seconds left, but I'm reminded something that Sandra said in an earlier conversation, which was about young people and how they're coming to our institutions, in droves, date nights, whatever, but they're not members. So we end up, it seems like perhaps institutions will sort of take them for granted. But if you're thinking about this work of equity, you're thinking about creating these communities, you have future curators, future leaders, where 50 years from now, when scholars and others are looking back at this particular moment, when museums are widely sort of acknowledged that exclusion of women artists has been a long-standing problem, what evidence will, what sort of groundwork will we have laid for these young people to take on the mantle? So just in 30 seconds and 10 seconds in one sentence, let us know sort of an example of sort of an inspirational sort of thought or an example of how you think young people in the future would be able to look at what we're doing now.
They walk through the galleries, our institutions, and find themselves reflected. They find works of art by artists they haven't heard of, are encouraged to go and learn more and feel that their institutions are part of their communities and part of their lives.
Yeah, very much like we have built the right foundation. I mean, just thinking about one of the priorities of an institution is to preserve the art of its time, to make sure that what we have done in terms of scholarships, program, acquisition, that those works are part of a larger narrative. That's a narrative we looked at. If you look back 40 or 50 years ago, I would hope that in 50 years, people feel that we have been more inclusive. We have found ways we found a sustainable path in order to pass from generation to generation the art we care for.
Right now, I feel like we're revisiting some of the same conversations that have been at play forever. So if I look forward to the future, I think if young people can say, wow, look at what they used to have to do. Look at the shit that they had to put up with. Look at whatever it is, right? If they could look back and say, wow, like, such and such did that so that we don't have to, or something like that. Like right now, there's a Guerrilla Girls show up, or at the Getty. I'm the presidential scholar there, and I walk past this exhibition whenever I'm at the museum, and I'm just kind of like, people are walking through, and they're just like, oh my, like it's like it's just happened. And you feel it, right? And I don't mean that about that place. It's just like really feels like it just happened. And that is so challenging. I once gave a speech at the commencement speech at Columbia University's Teachers College. It's like hundreds and hundreds of people. And the first 2 minutes of the speech, I just read Baldwin's A Talk to Teachers. I just read it verbatim. And I said, I know I sound amazing. And people were like, and I was like, these words were written before I was born. And that's a shame. Like, that is a shame that the same issues that Baldwin was tackling and addressing, I mean, in 1968, that they were resonating in such a profound way. And that is, and I feel like, why am I all pissed right now? But yeah, it's like kind of like, what, you know what I'm saying? So I would love for kids to be in the space like, wow, look how old that used to be. Like, look how, wow, like that's so dated. Like people didn't used to, like they did that. I want them to be like, ooh, I could not, or something.
So
you know what I mean?
passe.
So that's what I would like. Go ahead, Ann.
I love my friend Sandra so much. And I'm glad you did that because I'm sorry, I'm going to end on a negative note. I apologize. I am very concerned that I've been blessed in my lifetime to see a lot of progress, and I have been blessed to have role models like Annie Philbin here in the audience. Annie, I love you. And Sandra and all of you, all the artists who have opened my eyes and opened my heart and told me other stories. But I am petrified about what's happening to women in leadership throughout our country and certainly within our field.
Yes.
And I think that if we were to take a look at the people, the museum leaders, I'll say, who have lost their jobs, curators and directors, in recent years, we would find that men retire and women get fired. And I'm not seeing any data on this. If anybody is in the press here, I'd love for you to study it. But I am very concerned about what's happening to women, and in particular, women of color in our field, and I'm concerned about stepping backwards in time.
I'm going to say thank you all for your insights, for your work that you're doing within all of these institutions. Thank you to this audience for joining us and thinking critically about these ideas, and let's continue. Thank you.